The room was silent, but the silence carried a weight heavier than any scream. Dust particles floated like tiny specters in the weak beam of sunlight sneaking through the cracked blinds. In the corner, pressed against the back of a narrow closet, a small body trembled violently, tiny fingers clawing at the worn wooden floor. Every creak of the house made the child's heart hammer, each shadow twisting into a new threat. He could hear the faint, angry shouts from the living room, words meant to intimidate, to scare him into obedience, but he refused to move. He had learned quickly that moving could be dangerous. That opening the wrong door, even just a crack, could bring a wrath far worse than mere punishment. He had learned the art of becoming invisible, of blending into the dark corners where no one dared to look. His breathing was shallow, silent, a rhythm of survival he had perfected over months, maybe years. He couldn't even remember the last time he had felt truly safe. Outside, the world went on, oblivious to the terror inside these walls. But something had shifted tonight. The air was tense, charged, like the quiet before a storm. And then, faint at first, he heard a distant growl, metal against asphalt, engines echoing through the empty streets. It was not the kind of sound one mistook. It was the sound of justice barreling closer. Somewhere deep inside him, a fragile flicker of hope stirred. Could anyone hear him? Could anyone save him from this nightmare that had wrapped its fingers so tightly around his life? He dared not move, dared not even hope. Yet the rumble grew louder, stronger, a promise unspoken but undeniable. The child pressed his face further into the corner, hiding, shaking, heart pounding as the sound drew near. Outside the closet, the world waited with bated breath. And in that frozen moment, suspended between fear and hope, he realized that tonight might not be like all the other nights. Tonight, someone was coming for him, and they would not fail. His name was Ethan, though few had ever called him that in the past year. Most days, he felt like a ghost in his own home, an invisible presence that only drew anger when he made a sound. The man who was supposed to care for him had long abandoned any pretense of kindness. Ethan's stepfather, a towering figure with a permanent scowl and a temper that could ignite in seconds, ruled the house like a tyrant. Punishments were swift, cruel, and arbitrary. Every mistake, imagined or real, earned a sharp word, a slammed fist, or worse. Ethan had learned to survive in silence. Meals were eaten quickly and quietly, eyes fixed to the floor, hoping not to draw attention. Laughter was dangerous, joy was dangerous. And yet, beneath the fear, a spark of resilience remained. He remembered his mother's soft voice, the fleeting moments of warmth she tried to offer before she disappeared one night, leaving him behind with a man whose love was nothing more than an illusion. School offered only a brief escape. At first, Ethan had tried to confide in teachers, in classmates, but the bruises could be hidden, the tears wiped away, the silence rehearsed so well that no one suspected the storm raging inside him. He carried the invisible weight of constant fear, each day a battle not just to survive, but to believe that help could exist at all. He became an expert at hiding. Closets, under beds, behind doors, any space that could shield him became his fortress. Every creaking hinge, every whisper outside his hiding spot, was analyzed for threat. He memorized the pattern of footsteps in the house, learned when the man left the room, when he lingered. Ethan's life was a series of careful calculations, each one designed to keep him unseen, untouched. Yet, despite the terror, Ethan never gave up hope entirely. Somewhere deep in his chest, a small ember refused to die. He imagined a world where someone saw him not as a burden or a problem, but as a child who deserved safety, who deserved care. In the quiet moments, he dreamed of people who fought for others, who protected the weak, who refused to stand by while injustice ruled. He didn't know they existed, at least, not yet, but the idea of them gave him the courage to stay hidden, to endure, to survive one more hour, one more night. And on this night, as shadows danced across the walls of his cramped hiding place, that ember flickered stronger than ever. Somewhere beyond the front door, the low growl of engines rolled closer, carrying with it a promise Ethan could barely dare to believe. It was the sound of people who didn't just watch from the sidelines, who didn't turn away from pain. It was the sound of hope riding straight toward him, ready to tear open the darkness he had been trapped in for so long. The night deepened, and with it, the danger. Ethan's stepfather prowled the house with a predator's precision, furious that the child had even dared to hide. Each room echoed with the sharp slap of his boots on the floorboards, each door slammed in anger like a drumbeat of menace. The man was relentless, fueled by a mixture of rage and control, and tonight, he had a particular fury that made Ethan's chest tighten with terror. Minutes stretched like hours as Ethan listened, every nerve screaming in anticipation of discovery. The closet door trembled as footsteps approached, and the man's voice cut through the darkness like a whip. "I know you're in there, boy. Don't think you can hide from me." Ethan pressed himself farther into the corner, silent, shaking, praying the walls could swallow him whole. But he knew the truth. Eventually, the closet would be found. Eventually, the rage would find him. There was no one in the house who would intervene, no authority to call, just the relentless oppression that had been his life for months. Outside, the engines grew louder, almost drowning out the man's threats. But Ethan didn't dare hope yet. He had been disappointed too many times, hurt too deeply. The world had taught him that monsters often wore familiar faces, that salvation was rarely coming. Yet, even as his stepfather's shadow loomed closer, the vibration in the walls hinted at a force he couldn't yet understand, a force moving faster than fear itself. The man's hand reached for the closet doorknob, twisting it slowly, savoring the power of control. "Come out," he growled. "This ends tonight." Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs, the very air seeming to tighten around him. He had no choice but to cling to the fragile ember of hope that still burned inside him, that maybe, just maybe, someone was coming. Someone who wouldn't let this cruelty continue. And then, in the distance, over the roar of engines, a faint metallic clatter resonated, almost like a warning. The kind of warning that meant change was on the horizon. Ethan's pulse quickened, a confusing mix of dread and anticipation, as the darkness outside the closet began to tremble with the promise of justice. The night exploded with thunder, not from the sky, but from the road. A wall of sound swept through the neighborhood, low and commanding, like a stone rolling in with iron and fire. Headlights cut through the darkness as a line of motorcycles surged down the street, chrome glinting beneath the pale glow of street lamps. Their engines roared in perfect unison, each note a promise that something unstoppable had arrived. Inside the house, Ethan's stepfather froze, his hands still gripping the closet knob. The sudden intrusion of sound rattled his confidence, and for the first time that night, his face flickered with unease. He yanked open the closet door, expecting fear, but what he found were Ethan's wide, terrified eyes staring back at him, and beneath that fear, something else. "Hope!" the man snarled, grabbing Ethan by the arm. "Stay put," he spat, though his voice carried less certainty now. But before he could drag the boy away, a new sound cut through the chaos, the sharp, unified stomp of boots hitting the ground outside. One bike engine idled low, then another, until the whole street seemed to hum with the restrained growl of power. The front door shuddered under a heavy knock, 3 deep, deliberate raps that echoed like a judge's gavel. The man stiffened, his grip on Ethan tightening. "Stay quiet," he hissed, dragging the child further into the living room. But the knock came again, louder this time, followed by a voice that carried no hesitation. "Open the door." It wasn't a request, it was a command. The stepfather hesitated, sweat collecting on his brow. He'd heard rumors of these men. The brotherhood that rode not just for the thrill of the road, but for justice, for protection of the voiceless. Some called them outlaws. Others called them angels. Whatever name they carried, one truth was certain: when they arrived, things changed. The man tried to compose himself, barking out, "Get off my property." His voice cracked slightly, betraying his unease. The bikers didn't leave. Instead, the door swung open, not with violence, but with an almost eerie gentleness. One by one, they stepped inside, boots heavy on the wooden floor, leather vests catching the dim light. At the front was their leader, a man with steel-gray eyes that seemed to cut through every lie, every pretense. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply looked at the boy. And in that look, Ethan saw something he had never seen before in any adult's eyes: protection. The leader crouched slightly, softening his tone. It's okay, kid. We've got you. The stepfather's grip tightened on Ethan, but for the first time, the boy didn't shrink back. Behind the leader, more bikers fanned out, their presence filling the room with a quiet, immovable strength. They didn't shout, they didn't threaten, they didn't need to. The sheer unity of their presence spoke louder than words. Ethan's lip trembled, his body still shaking, but a new wave of courage pushed against his fear. For the first time in months, maybe years, he realized he wasn't alone anymore. Someone had come, not just someone, but a whole brotherhood, and they weren't going to let him slip back into the shadows. The living room was charged with tension, every breath suspended in the heavy air. Ethan's stepfather, still clutching the boy's arm, sneered at the men filling his doorway. His bravado returned in a desperate surge, as if anger could mask the fear creeping into his veins. "You've got no right to be here," he barked, spittle flying with each word. "This is my house. My kid. Get out before Before you what?" The leader's voice cut through like a blade, calm but laced with steel. He took one deliberate step forward, his boots thudding against the floor. The other bikers shifted subtly, forming a wall behind him, every one of them glaring at the man like wolves circling a predator. The stepfather faltered, his eyes darting from face to face, realizing he was no longer the strongest man in the room. Still, his pride wouldn't let him yield. He yanked Ethan closer, the boy crying out in pain. "He's mine. You don't get to tell me how to raise him." The leader's jaw clenched. He bent his head slightly, locking eyes with the boy. "Son, you okay?" Ethan's voice trembled, but he found strength he didn't know he had. "Please, don't let him take me back." That one sentence changed everything. The bikers moved in unison. One of them, a towering man with a scar down his cheek, stepped closer, pointing a finger at the stepfather. "We've seen men like you before. You think fear makes you powerful. You think silence means you're in control. But tonight," he tilted his head, his voice lowering to a growl. "Tonight, that silence breaks." The stepfather's face reddened, his voice cracking. "You don't scare me. You think just because you wear leather and ride your damn bikes, you're some kind of heroes? You're nothing." Before he could finish, another biker spoke up, his voice booming like a hammer striking steel. "We don't care what you think. We care about him." He nodded toward Ethan, whose tear-streaked face peeked from behind the man's arm. The leader stepped closer, now only inches away. He didn't shout. He didn't move to strike. Instead, he whispered with lethal calm, "Let him go." The stepfather's grip wavered. For the first time, true fear seeped into his eyes. He looked around the room, 10 men, every one of them ready to step forward if he made the wrong move. His chest heaved with rage, but his hand trembled as he shoved Ethan away. The boy stumbled, but strong arms caught him. One of the bikers knelt, pulling Ethan gently behind their line of leather and steel. The child clung to him, burying his face into the biker's vest as if it were the safest place on earth. "Good," the leader said softly, his eyes never leaving the stepfather. "You made one smart choice tonight. But don't mistake this for forgiveness." The room grew still. The bikers didn't need fists or weapons, their presence alone was a verdict. The leader's words struck harder than any punch, "Men like you destroy lives. But this ends now. You don't get to break him anymore. You don't get to scare him anymore. You don't get to own him anymore." The stepfather tried to laugh, but it came out hollow, broken. "You think the law will back you up?" A deep chuckle rolled from one of the men. "The law? The law's already on its way. You'll be answering to more than us tonight." And then, as if summoned by fate itself, the sound of sirens rose in the distance. Blue and red lights soon spilled across the windows, painting the room in justice. The stepfather's shoulders sagged, his arrogance collapsing as officers stormed the doorway, alerted by the bikers earlier. The bikers didn't move to claim glory. They simply stepped back, forming a shield around Ethan, their presence unyielding as the officers cuffed the man who had ruled with fear for far too long. Ethan's eyes darted from the police to the bikers, still clutching tightly to the vest he held. His voice was small, fragile, but filled with gratitude. "You saved me." The leader knelt down, meeting him eye to eye. "No, kid. You saved yourself the moment you held on. We just made sure you were heard." The flashing red and blue lights eventually faded into the night as the police car disappeared down the street, carrying Ethan's stepfather away in handcuffs. The house, once suffocating with silence and fear, now felt different, lighter, as if the walls themselves had been freed. Ethan stood near the door, his small hands still gripping the edge of a leather vest for comfort. The bikers didn't rush him. They didn't overwhelm him with questions. Instead, they gave him space, their presence a silent reassurance that he was safe. The leader crouched down once more, his weathered face softening. "You don't have to hide anymore," he said gently. "You've got a family now, maybe not by blood, but by bond. And bonds can be stronger." Ethan blinked, his tears finally slowing, replaced by something fragile but powerful, trust. He whispered, almost afraid to believe it, "I don't have to go back." One of the bikers ruffled his hair lightly, his rough hand surprisingly gentle. "Not a chance, kid. Tonight, you start over." For the first time in what felt like forever, Ethan smiled. It wasn't wide, it wasn't loud, but it was real. The closet, the bruises, the fear, all of it began to feel like a shadow that no longer had power over him. He looked at the men surrounding him, their jackets patched with symbols he didn't yet understand, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty: they had chosen him. They had chosen to protect him. As the engines roared back to life, the bikers began to file out, their presence as commanding as when they had arrived. Ethan stood at the doorway, watching them mount their bikes, a sense of awe washing over him. The leader looked back once, gave a small nod, and spoke over the rumble. "Remember this, Ethan, heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes, they ride." The boy's smile widened, his heart swelling with courage he'd never felt before. For the first time, he believed in tomorrow. The pack of bikes thundered down the street, fading into the night like unsung guardians, leaving behind a boy who was no longer afraid. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe for more powerful biker hero stories that show the strength of brotherhood and the courage to protect the innocent.